biggest risk was, starting the band in the first place and putting all our money into basically going to debt to go sell CDs on a tour where nobody knows who the hell you are, and then winning in life there
to start the band and to do that first Warped Tour between. I guess my dad basically bought us a van that we just had to pay him back for, and then pressing the CDs ourselves. We were like $25,000 in debt from the start of that Warped Tour.
And then we got in a wreck during that tour, and we had to buy a new trailer, so even more debt piled on.
Right. So that was definitely. In a way, certainly a risk. Just hoping that we're going to be able to get out there and sell enough CDs to make this money to pay these people back. But
we did.
We did, yeah. we did.
Yeah.
Hello, we're Mayday Parade, and this is the oral history of Mayday Parade. So it goes back pretty far. Basically, we're all from Tallahassee, Florida, except Jake's from Cairo, Georgia, which is about 40 minutes away. And we all more or less grew up, playing in different bands together. And at the time Mayday Parade started, myself and Cabbage and Brooks were in a band called Defining Moment. And Jake and Alex and Jason Lancaster were in a band called Kid Named Chicago. So Cabbage and I, for a while, had been talking about the possibility of taking some members from one band and some members from the other band and kind of coming together. We all joked about calling it the super band or a super group, but we didn't really, it was never super serious. We were almost kind of like halfway joking about it. And then one night, we both of those bands played a lot of shows together. We played a show somewhere in South Georgia. You remember that?
Camilla?
It may have been Camilla. Yeah. We played a show together, and I wound up riding in your car, Jake, back, even though I didn't really know you super well. I knew you, but we weren't really all that close. But I went up riding back with Jake and just thought I'm just gonna ask him. I'm just gonna see what he thinks. And I said, Jake, I want to ask you something. And he goes, I already know what you're gonna say. And the answer is yes, we should do it. And I thought that was crazy that he knew what I was talking about. And I was like, wait, for real? Yeah. And he's like, yeah, let's join.
We should go get Waffle House.
You go to Waffle, yeah. And so we kind of spent, the rest of that drive kind of talking about it. And then because he was so on board with it, and I knew that some of us were as well, and I think Alex had kind of heard some of this.
I'm sure Cabbage.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, Cabbage had maybe mentioned it.
Best friends.
So we went back. There was a house at the time that Alex and Cabbage and Jason lived there, right? Kind of.
Brooks did at one point too.
Right, a lot of our friend group and a lot of folks in these bands lived at. So that's where we were all kind of heading back to after the show. And so we kind of got there and circled the six of us for the first time. And we're like, do you guys want to do this? Do you want to kind of, I guess, essentially quit our other bands and reform as a new band? Everybody seemed pretty on board with it.
We were all pumped at the time.
Oh, we were all, yeah, exactly.
I think I had a lot of energy, excited about the possibility of it happening.
Right, exactly. And then I guess the conversation was, well, we need to kind of get together and try this out. And so I think I don't know if it was the next day or a couple days later, we got together. There was a warehouse, you call it a warehouse, it was kind of a little storage unit shed thing that both of our bands practiced at. And so we just got together as the six of us and tried, a first band practice. We wrote the song 3 Cheers for 5 years. And I remember just everything just clicking immediately and just feeling great about it and everyone being really excited about it. So I think that kind of was the green light that we should totally do this. Not long after that, we told the members of our other bands that we would be, leaving, and that was a very difficult thing to do because they were some of our closest friends. And so it was really hard, but it was something that we just felt we needed to do. All the experience of being in bands before that we kind of put into this band. From day one we kind of had a plan of this is how we're gonna do it. Like we're gonna, nobody is, I think Alex at the time was in college, and it was kind of like, well, you're gonna have to, not be in college. Well, we're gonna have to dedicate like everything. We can't have like jobs or commitments here. Like we want to be able to really give this like everything, and to be able to be free to tour.
That was one of the reasons why we wanted to start the super group as well, because some of the other members in our other bands, had like jobs that they were committed to, or like didn't want to travel long term, and so kids. So we wanted just like a band that's like, you're going to go on tour and that's going to be the life, you know what I mean?
Right, like just to know that we had really gave it 100% to make it happen. And we had done some small touring and Defining Moment, the band before this, and we had kind of developed this system of selling CDs on tour. And in fact, we had followed Warped Tour with that band and sold an EP just walking around outside in the line. And we were pretty successful doing that. At this point, when we started Mayday Parade, I think it was late October of 2005, that the plan was, okay, well, we're going to need to write 6 songs and record an EP and pay to get it pressed ourselves and press, 10 to 15,000 copies of it and have that all done and ready for us to follow Warped Tour in 2006. So that was kind of like the goal, right from the bat, and it was just kind of building towards that. And that's basically what we did, and sold CDs on Warped Tour 2006 and started to kind of create a buzz about the band. And then we were approached by some labels and signed to Fearless Records actually while we were on Warped Tour. And then everything just kind of kept moving forward from there. So it really was like, there's a lot of, like bands that we were in where, you feel like it took years to really get much of anything going. But with Mayday Parade, it felt like it was kind of just like a shot, out of a gun. Like we just were just off to the races right off the bat.
I feel like it honestly was a combination of the two bands together. The two previous bands that we formed this band with. I felt like it was a good combination of both sounds, because Kid Named Chicago was a little heavier, on the heavier side, and then our band, Defining Moment, us three, was more of like the pop rock, pop punk sort of side. And then I felt like it merged to be like a nice sort of heavy guitars, but with like pop melodies, and like leaning more towards the rock than the punk. And I don't know, I just felt like it was like a real good combination of the both. So after the 3 Cheers for 5 years, I felt like that kind of was the sound.
And that song does give you a taste of all of the elements that we still use and did use back then. It's got the light and the more rocking side of it. So it was a good example of what was to come.
I remember being very excited about it and feeling like, like this is it. Like we've found the right combination of elements to all this. And then of course the 2 singer thing, that Jason sang in Kid Named Chicago and I sang in Defining Moments, and we were all huge fans of like Taking Back Sunday and Blink-182 and like these other bands that had that approach. And so that kind of seemed like a natural thing as well, that we had never done in any previous bands, but was a cool element to Mayday Parade, and something that we've mostly kind of stuck to throughout everything. There's usually some of that dual vocal kind of thing going on. Myspace was the big social media, especially for music and for bands, the platform back then. And I remember before we got signed, that's where kind of the buzz was being generated from. And I remember the day that we got 1,000 plays in one day, and that was just huge. That was like, I remember we called each other and we were like, we just got in one day today we got over 1,000 plays, and it was like, oh my god, that's insane. So there were like several moments like that where it was like, I can't believe this is all like happening, and we've only been a band for like a couple months at that point, and so it was pretty wild for sure. We had never made a full length before, and so it was like, a very like daunting task. Not that long after we had finished recording 3 Cheers for 5 years, the first EP, and put that out, there already were a handful of songs, because we continued, like we would practice, I think like 5 days a week.
Yeah, pretty much every day.
We'd go out to Cabbage's parents' house every weekday, and that was like just always, like anytime we were, it wasn't like, just getting ready for a tour, or just like, it was just like that was our schedule always. We had a handful of songs already written, before we'd even been signed to Fearless, but we just kind of stuck with that. Once we signed and we knew that, we were going to be going in to record our first full length, we just continued to push hard and go out there every day and just work. We'd play these songs just over and over and over again and change things and try new things. And certainly, I don't think any of us had any idea that it would, become what it has become and that it would be as important as it is to us and to so many people. As far as the songs, there were several that were obvious, like there were, I don't know how many, but out of the 12, there were probably 7 or 8 that were just kind of like the standout, like we all agreed, these songs are great, we're gonna do these songs. Kenneth Mount and Zach Odom are the producers for that album, and they were a big part of that decision as well. Whenever we went in for pre-pro, at this point we still kind of had all 18 songs or whatever on the table, and we played through I think most of them during pre-pro and spent a lot of time with them, kind of whittling things down and maybe like eliminating certain songs.
Well, the label also kind of had like a little push on certain songs. They had some song favorites for sure.
Right.
I think everybody did. The band had their favorites, the producers had their favorites, and then the label had their favorites, and it was just kind of like, which ones?
Well, like for example, re-recording When I Get Home You're So Dead, I don't think that was not something that we would have done, but the label, Fearless really wanted us to do that. And I think, without that input, we probably would have just done 12 new songs. Jamie All Over was an old Kid Named Chicago song. But there were a couple of those like older songs from previous bands that we listened through and put some attention on to see. And obviously, Jamie All Over, I think was a good choice. Yeah, the sophomore attempt is like a mass, that's a massive undertaking, and it's hard, especially with a first album that is like, pretty successful, like right off the bat. Then there is a lot of pressure to follow up, and then like we were upstream to Atlantic Records, so now we were on a bigger label, many times the budget, on the album, and of course,
and a lot more hands,
right,
in your creativity, telling you what to do and how it should sound.
Right, a lot more people involved, and you kind of lose some of that creative freedom going from a label like Fearless to Atlantic, where they're going to have a heavier hand on things. And then, of course, Jason left the band before Lesser Romantics had come out, so it was in between us recording that album. The first tour that we went on shortly after finishing recording that album was with the Plain White Tees, and I guess about midway through that tour, Jason left. Between all of that, it was a lot to kind of process, and we wrote a lot of songs for Anywhere But Here, more than we had for Lesson in Romantics. I don't know what it was in total, but over 20 songs, and maybe closer to 30 songs. It was a very stressful time, to be honest, and there were a lot of songs that we liked and we were really excited about that we couldn't really get Atlantic on board with. And so we had to make a lot of compromises, and we ended up doing a lot of co-writing, which wasn't really something we were super keen on doing, but felt like we just had to. We didn't want to rock the boat too much, and we wanted to kind of go along with their plan. There's probably a lot of mixed feelings in the band on that album. There's a lot of things I love about it, and I love the process of recording it in a lot of ways, but there were also a lot of things that were kind of awful.
I think a lot of bands go through that, so it's like our take on the process, and as I've gotten older and I look back on it, I don't, as much as I did not enjoy that album, the creative part of putting that album together, I kind of appreciate it more now, listening back and going, these songs aren't bad, and it's just kind of a different way of approaching how we created music. Then when I think of that album that way, and I don't think about how pissed I was in the moment of recording, I guess I can enjoy the music and listen to it and go, I can actually go, these are good songs, and I get why fans really like that record as well.
I have less bitterness towards it than I used to have, and as I've said many times, but I think is true, is that that's a process that destroys so many bands. And there's a lot of bands that don't, that'll kill your career, and the fact that we were able to kind of go through that, and then, kind of make it past that and be sort of more defined with like what we wanted as a band after that, to be able to move forward and not just like, call it quits or break up. I'm very grateful that we were able to make it through that process, I guess. Yeah.
I think it took also doing this 10-year anniversary of that record for us to fully appreciate the record in itself.
Right.
And seeing people react to it and how much it meant to them. I think that really changed our view on the entire process of that record. Or the record in general.
It's actually the day that Anywhere But Here came out. We were playing in Salt Lake City, Utah on the AP tour with the Academy Is. And I remember kind of like realizing that day that I was not excited for this album. And I remember feeling like I've been in denial. Like I've been like trying to just like bury like these thoughts, but like I'm not excited. Like we did all these co-writes, and there was like all of our creative freedom was stripped away from us. All of it kind of hitting me on that day, and I think that we all probably sort of felt that way, and especially like compared to A Lesson in Romantics, that we were all like so excited about putting out. To go from that to something that you're just like, I don't really love this album. I'm not excited about it. I think that kind of changed a lot of things for us, and I don't remember the exact conversation, but we all kind of talked about like, okay, moving forward, we've got to do this differently. Moving forward, we have to go back to like, let's just do what we did for Lesson in Romantics. Let's just get together as a band and create the songs that we want to create and go record them, and not kind of have to jump through the hoops of doing what this other entity wants you to do. And I'll say, I guess to Atlantic's credit, we were technically still signed to them. And our manager at the time kind of approached them on our behalf to be like, listen, like, we love everything you guys have done for us, but it would mean a lot if you would just let us go and work on a different label that is where we have the creative freedom that we would like to have. And they could have said, no, we're not going to do that, but they said, okay, that's fine. You guys can, they let us go and do our own thing. And so I'm super grateful for that. And then of course, the self-titled album was much more of that, I guess, like return to form, and that same sort of style of Lesson in Romantics, and just us trying to make the songs we want to make. And it was back to like being excited about things again and being excited about that album. And
one of the best things to come out of that whole process of doing Anywhere But Here is that as a band, we kind of realized like no one else is going to stick up for us other than ourselves. And so, if we want to be a band that has the creative freedom and makes the choices for our band, then we need to be the ones to demand that and sort of stick up for ourselves and
right.
go that direction. And so we kind of since then have always sort of taken the approach like, we're going to make sure that we do it our way, and we're going to have the final say on things, and not that we're not going to listen to input, but just that ultimately at the end of the day, it's going to have to be a record that we're happy with, and that that ultimately is something that means a lot to us. And if we just did it the way the label wants to, or the way that everyone else would want it to be done, we're not going to be happy with it. I'm kind of glad that we went through the hardship of Anywhere But Here, so that we can have the mindset of just like taking ownership of our band.
Right, we learned a lot from that process, and we learned what we want and don't want as a band.
And we survived it.
And we survived it, yeah. Recording a self-titled was, one, just such a fun process, and two, of course, it was more, we were just much happier with the results and everything. And so it was a lot of like kind of the same.
Right.
We kind of wanted to do the same. We had rented a beach house when we wrote a lot of self-titled. We rented a beach house and got together, isolated for I think a month or whatever it was, and wrote most of that album. And then went into record. So we kind of wanted to do the same thing for Monsters in the Closet. We rented a beach house for a month, got together, basically wrote, the album, came in with Zach and Ken here at this very same studio that we're sitting in right now. It was very much like, let's kind of just make this self-titled album again. And almost to a point where I think maybe that was like a flaw of that album, was that, maybe we had gotten a little too comfortable, and we're just kind of like repeating this worked for self-titled, so it should work for this one too. For me, Monsters in the Closet, I think, would be probably one of my lower, like less favorite albums that we've done, and it's really kind of hard to pinpoint exactly why, but I think that's certainly some of it, and I think that's kind of part of where it went wrong, I guess, is that we were just a little too comfortable, I think.
With Anywhere But Here, you had you had a restriction on what we were creating. Well, we were creating a lot of that music, but like it was restricted, and then you had all this pent up material that you could release right on self-titled,
right?
And then you had to hit it, like after releasing all that great material there, it was tough to do it again, back to back.
Right.
It's another example of like almost like a redo of a sophomore release.
I think that we all kind of like felt that way about Monsters in the Closet, that we had gotten too comfortable, and so Black Lines was kind of like a back to the drawing board kind of thing of like, let's not worry so much about what Mayday Parade has been up to this point, and let's just like, now we're we'd been a band for probably 10 years at that point, and a lot of things had changed, and it was like, let's make the music that we want to make right now. It was darker, it was heavier. We went to a different producer to try and like kind of for that same reason of like getting outside the comfort zone, and really just like challenging ourselves. And I sang that whole album with no auto-tune, sort of in that same mind of like challenging myself, just seeing if I could do it kind of thing. And we wanted it to be raw and a little rougher around the edges.
We grew up in the 90s with a lot of 90s rock bands. We kind of took a lot of inspiration from that, as in the direction of where the album could go.
Yeah, to me it wasn't even a crazy departure, like it's just, like you said, heavier. Darker and a little bit heavier. But then there's still even songs that we continue to create now that could be on that record as well. And, like you said, like the being rougher around the edges and stuff, that has like probably the biggest difference between like other records is just like the sonic sound of it and the approach with the songs. And yeah, just they're not as happy. They're not as melodic or like major.
I'd say we learned that
it's maybe a little bit too heavy for our audience.
Well, yeah, I'd say that like it was like it's like this is what we wanted to. We were like, we could we like playing this sort of darker, heavier music, but then it was like, well, but people don't like us doing that, so so you kind of have to, and you have to keep that in mind. When we did that album, it was like a not like kind of turning your back on everything you'd done before, but just not considering that so much. And moving forward, it's like, well, I guess you do kind of have to consider the music that we've made throughout our career. And I think for Sunnyland, the thing that I tried to do was to look at everything we had done and go like, what do we do well? Like, what is it that Mayday Parade is really good at? And what do people like about this band? And how can we sort of take that and build upon that for the newest album? And that, to me, Sunnyland, and I think for most of us, that was kind of the idea, was kind of pinpointing like, what is it that we're really good at, and let's focus on that and try and just do it even better.
Right, and kind of take a little bit from every album we've done, because we didn't want to completely write off the Black Lines experience and not have any sort of material like that. So we kind of have a couple songs that kind of relate to Black Lines, and then stuff that's more like old Mayday Parade, and then stuff that's very self-titled-ish. So it kind of dabbles in a little bit of all our records.
Right. There's a point where you get into so many records in your career, and you do have to stay true to what you are with your brand, because if somebody changes, like if Cheerios changes the way they taste, why would people buy Cheerios anymore, right? It's the same kind of thing with music, I think, to some extent. You gotta stay true to your brand, but then also you do have to understand that there is an evolution that needs to happen at some point. For some bands, maybe not AC/DC, but most other bands, and I think that's part of the mentality, and whether it's in the back of our minds while we're creating this music, but it's also just a natural evolution that's happening. I think if you listen to Sunnyland compared to almost any other record, like, I mean, there's like a feeling, like you could maybe say like take one song and try and compare it to an old song, and you can do that, but like as an overall feeling, there's like it's almost, it's not night and day, but it's very apparently changing. You can see it and hear it.
I don't think we knew that we were recording an EP, you know, until after it was all recorded. So it wasn't necessarily that the plan was to go in and record a 3-song EP. It was more just after Sunnyland and, you know, about a year of touring on that. Sunnyland we had kind of split up where we kind of did it in 2 halves. We kind of recorded the first half of the album and the second half of the album months later. So we kind of wanted to do more of that. So early 2019, I guess, or somewhere around there, maybe spring of 2019, we went into the studio and recorded like 4 or 5 songs or something, without much of a plan of what was going to happen with those songs. Just wanting to go ahead and get that process started, and thinking maybe these could be for a future full length, or maybe it is for an EP, or maybe it's just for some singles. March of this year, we went back in and recorded another, I don't know, 3 or 4 songs. And that was right when all of the, you know, COVID-19 stuff really started to kind of break. And it was while we were in the studio, and it was pretty crazy to be here while that was all starting to become, you know, a thing. So we finished tracking those songs, went home, and then all of our, you know, plans of touring and everything that we kind of had planned for the rest of the year, of course, was kind of wiped clean by coronavirus. And so we kind of evaluated, you know, what should we do while we're so limited right now, and there's so many things that we can't do. We have these songs recorded that we could put out, and so we decided to take 3 of those songs and release them as an EP, and kind of save the rest for the next full length. And we'll go back in so hopefully sometime this year to finish up a full length. I love the EP so much. Love everything about it, the album artwork, and you know, the video, and everything is, yeah, it's gonna be really cool.
We've been able to stay friends throughout this whole thing. Like, you see a lot of bands that just kind of fall apart or just get ripped apart because of something that's going on, but somehow we're like, I mean, I think you guys still like me, but like we're still really good friends throughout this entire process. You know what I mean? I feel like we've grown together, and like we still love each other throughout it all.
I do think that we all genuinely love what we do, and appreciate what we do, and that our lives could have gone many, many different ways, and that we're so lucky to be able to do what we do, and it's the most fun thing I could possibly imagine doing. I feel like that's a big part of why we all have been able to stick with it, and with the 5 of us, and is that we genuinely care and love doing it, and love being around each other, and we're, you know, these are the closest friends I have in my life, you know, and yeah, it's all real stuff, you know.
We've tried to create honest music, and music that we enjoy, and you know, I think that's something that we've always valued, and I think our fans acknowledge that and recognize it and appreciate it.
I hope it's something we can continue to do, you know, for years to come. I mean, I think that's the end goal. We don't have any plans of splitting up anytime soon, and so hopefully we can just continue to make good music that people like.
Right, and just being impactful, you know. I think it's great that we've been able to get to the point that we are in rock music, and especially within the emo scene. You know, when we were coming up, or when I was in high school and we had the aspirations and the dreams to do this, I just wanted to be able to tour the country and play for like 300 people every night, you know, in your bigger cities. And since we've been able to do that, that's great, and I just want to be able to continue to impact more and more people with the music we put out.
It's crazy to think, like, when we started this band, like all the bands that we looked up to, that we kind of strive to make music like, or just inspired us, and to think that, like, we are at the point where the bands coming up nowadays, like, we are an inspiration to those bands. Like, it's very humbling to know that, like, a lot of people have taken inspiration from our band, or consider us, like, one of those bands that, like, kind of helped change the scene in a way, and that, you know, to them we are, you know, their inspiration. It's like very humbling feeling to know that.